Well, welcome to Techman Talks Dynamics, our first get-together of 2023, new year. I think this is the third year we've been doing the podcast now, so a bit of a milestone for us. And what we're going to try and talk about as a topic is something we've seen be pushed by Microsoft or encouraged by Microsoft over the last few years now. It's been quite a while. That's the idea of a templated or a fixed outcome solution when you're deploying ERP. So what we thought we'd do is have a little discussion around what that looks like, what the difference is between the traditional way we've deployed ERP over the last probably 30 years as a company, and what the benefits are, what the boundaries are, and we've now got an offering that is lined up for a particular industry vertical as well that we'll touch on a little bit later on in the conversation. So, is it right to start with a definition of what we think a traditional way we would deploy ERP?
The traditional way is to ask the client
what do you want?
Yeah.
And the first arguably third of the project and sometimes more than that can be the design phase, the FRD, call it what you like, where actually you're documenting, because and effectively there has to be, if it is ultimately varied and can be completely configured for that particular organisation, then in effect from a commercial point of view, you've got to go a definition, and also from success point of view, you've got to go a definition of what are we actually doing this time as opposed to every other time, and from a client's point of view, what are their expectations. So you do an awful lot of talking and an awful lot of workshops at the beginning of the project.
And a lot of documentation.
You typically burn, a third of the budget in the design phase. Now, I've just finished building a house, you guys know, and a lot of people out there know, and kind of, the design phase, it's, if you're going to have something that's completely unique to you, you absolutely have to do that, because it's, software is no different from construction. Whereas if you start wanting to move walls and change doorways and even putting a plug in a different place, boy, is that expensive to do at the end.
And so
when it's all built.
For anything bespoke, that phase of design is really, really important if it is bespoke.
But it's hard as well.
It's all down to interpretation as well.
And you've got to have a huge kind of capacity to imagine, because you can't, you're changing your parameters by definition. That's what you're spending the money for, is you're reimagining how your business will work. And that takes a lot of bravery, I think, is probably the word that comes to mind, to say, how is, what will be better? And that's where people, probably the premier mistake of doing that is to retreat back to, this is the way we do it now,
in our current system, it does this.
Minimise the risk. The other one is that they try and do everything. Particularly organisations that haven't changed their system for a while, they then say, this is, we haven't had any major change in the last 10 years where our current system has come to the end of its lifespan and it got more and more difficult. So I've got to ask for everything I might possibly want now, because I'm not going to get that other opportunity. So they try and make the starting solution unbelievably complex, because they think if they don't get it now, I'll never get it.
It's not only covering what they've got, but it's also extra stuff that they think they'd like as well, the wish list, and that gets expensive.
Yes, and actually I think a lot of the times we've seen numerous situations, Matt, where actually we've spent the next 2 years taking chunks of it out, because what they think they want 6 months before they have a new system in, and what they think they want 6 months after they've got experience of that new system and how it should work and started to tune into how it thinks, two quite different things generally.
Well, that's the point,
however
isn't it,
good
as well,
they
in
are.
that using the traditional methodology, you are doing that design phase before the client really understands the solution.
Has seen the software
They
much.
don't know what it does out the box. They don't know whether they can adapt their processes to meet what's out the box. And there's some skill in the consultant, but that's all down to interpretation as well. Because if you've got a requirement, we'd all potentially come up with a slightly different way of doing essentially the same thing. Yeah. Whereas actually, if you really understand what the standard solution can do for you first, then that makes that design process much easier.
A lot of customers will say,
Yes,
we're not a complex business. We're no different to everybody else.
Everyone says that.
Yes, but they always are.
They always will say what we do is standard, but then there will always be the things that they do that maybe aren't.
We have seen a bit of a shift, I know, early on in the sales process where customers have gone through, or organisations have gone through 1 or 2 ERP implementations now, and they're a bit more scarred. It might be one word for it. They've got some experience.
Wise.
And they do say, wise, that's the right word. And they are then saying, well, we would like to stay more out the box if we can. There's always something they need, I get
But
that.
you get into the workshops, Liam, and that aspiration in the sales phase
Agreed.
there, we can't do without X,
Yeah.
or we
Yeah.
need Y. And, you know, often that aspiration to say standard is what's coming from the sponsor, the people at the top of the organisation. But
Not
when you
end
get down
users.
to the operational people on the ground, they're not always, I'm standard, except I need this. And when you put all those people together, that's quite a lot of accepts.
Yeah. So that's the traditional way, and we know the downfalls of that typically would be we go over budget because people want more as they're going through. We're a bit more agile. We can change things in that process. There's a big cost up front around the design, as you've mentioned, and typically it can take a long time in terms of.
And you know, you do that blueprint, and that you spend a lot of time doing that functional requirement document, day in the life, whatever the particular partner organisation calls it, and you do that blueprint. And I would guess, you know, the number of organisations that maintain that blueprint even to the end of the project for what actually is now designed to happen, versus you very quickly get a set of change requests on top of that of actually we're going to, you know, we've worked through the UAT process, you know, the user acceptance testing. We've actually got our data into this system. We've discovered actually that doesn't quite work the way we thought it did. Nobody goes back and updates the design document. So actually, you spend a lot of time doing that documentation, and the long-term value of that documentation, I have to say, I think is minimal.
Mm-hmm.
We have had occasions where it's absolutely essential, you know, where there are very specific requirements around things like integrations or kind of new areas of the system that you're building, and you do need it. But
integrations are a different case in point, because that's normally pretty fixed because you've got multiple
this
parties
field
involved.
maps to this field. This is this software we're going to.
I think it helps you build the 80-90% of the system, so it has it's you know, it's useful from that perspective.
Oh, we wouldn't do it if it was zero.
Exactly,
yes,
yeah. But retrospectively, and you know, using it 12 months afterwards, it becomes very little
Hard.
value. Yes.
So the difference then with a
Differences.
templated solution is that we don't do any of that.
No analysis.
No analysis, no upfront workshops, no FRD or functional requirements document or specification or whatever, or diagnostic or whatever. There's about 20 different names for it. None of that. This is the software, this is what you're going to use.
Okay. So that sounds nice in one way, but it also sounds, well, that's never going to fit my business. So what's the difference around what we've tried to do here? I mean, I'm assuming we've done that work up front with our experience. We've built something that's going to fit a percentage of the customers.
But the analogy I would always use, Liam, is that you three are okay because you're normal size, okay? But everybody out there who's met me knows that at 2 meters 10, 6 foot 10...
We're wandering into dangerous territory. How do I define what is a normal size?
I feel body shamed.
But, you know, as somebody who's got... I've always quoted 40 inside leg. I turned that into metric for one of my European friends and realised it's a 1 metre inside leg. And so you just can't go into a shop and buy that off the shelf, right? So, you know, you three can come out of probably the high street looking quite reasonable. I come out without trousers, which is probably not a look that I'm particularly keen on sharing. So I have to go to... So that the analogy I'm trying to use is, look, going to the high street and buying clothes off the peg, if you know, there is a range of sizes, as there is a range of templates, you can find this bit, and put them together and actually make something that looks pretty spectacular if you're in normal body shape, yes. Whereas there are a few people out there, me included, unfortunately, that, you know, and I have to say, for me to buy trousers, it's substantially more expensive than you guys, because I have to pay for bespoke, or a lot of the time. Occasionally there's some
with the
specials.
template, we are most of the offerings that are out there, at least in the Dynamics world, are They're a fixed template. You choose what you're going to get. You sometimes can have different options, a bit like when you go and buy a car, you get packs or add-ons, which will add a little bit of extra functionality or something for you. But you start with a vanilla, typical finance system, and then you build out a little bit with the packs.
Yeah.
That will be at a fixed price, normally delivered a lot quicker because you haven't got to do the workshops. You haven't got to get the consultant to design something when whoever delivers it knows exactly what they're going to do because they've done it before and again and again. So you are bringing into them far more fixed outcomes in terms of what you get.
Fixed outcome is the key point, isn't it? So for a fixed outcome, it's a fixed cost. Yeah. So, and I think, like you've mentioned before, that there's lots of organisations now that have been through this process several times and are scarred by it. I had a meeting with a customer 2 days ago who was questioning quite fiercely not only our day rate and why it's so high, and there's many reasons, why anybody's services cost what they cost, but also how does he know that when we put on our timesheet that it's something that took 7 hours, that it's really took 7 hours, and if we use a less skilled person, then he should be charged a lower day rate. And how do we work out what skill level corresponds to what day rate? And that this, if you've been scarred by that, and I argued with him also quite fiercely that we are a reputable business, we rely on long-term relationships, we charge what we use, but if you don't want to take that risk, then this kind of project is ideal. But there are certain cases where it won't work, if you've got very unique requirements, but it does take away that risk of that kind of time and materials type billing where you are just charged what you used, and where people can say, oh yeah, we'll just add that in and we'll just add that in, and then all of a sudden, because for every piece of development that you do, all of the other costs will go up as well. So you will have more UAT, user acceptance testing. Try not to use acronyms all the time.
Training can't be out
you
of the
will
box.
have more training,
you have to do
because
bespoke training.
you bespoke.
More project management.
You will have more project management, and then ultimately the solution will cost more to run on a long-term basis. If you're on the SaaS platform, the monthly fee that you pay to maintain that SaaS platform will increase. The more bespoke work that you have, the more complicated your updates become. Every month, every release,
more factors involved,
because there is more chance that the bespoke that you've had will clash with something that meant that's. So with this solution, then you are guaranteeing that you have a standard solution. Which isn't to say that, once you're live, once it's bedded in, once you really understand what you've got, you can't then build on it further.
Yeah.
It's not the final solution, is it?
But
To
you
use
are
a
at
horrible
least
phrase,
you're getting those building blocks in with a fixed outcome and a fixed cost, and much, much, much faster than you would doing a bespoke project.
Yeah, there's a couple of scenarios that we're kind of aiming this at. It is, there are customers that out the box Business Central will be fine. We even had a bicycle manufacturer the other day, so I even had a demo system. It was kind of nearly there.
Inside joke.
Yeah. I think most ERP systems tend to go bicycles for some reason. So that's one option. The other option is
but Matt, I want my bicycle not tracked.
Yeah, but some
then that becomes
so some customers want a system that they can get in quickly and then grow. Have a phase 2, have a phase 3.
Yeah.
So as long as that that minimal viable solution that they start with, they can work with. There might be some workarounds. There might be some
compromises.
Some manual things you do, but you're understanding that this is just to get you on the platform. It gets you going. You understand it, and therefore, when you then start thinking about phase 2, you're not at that point that we talked about earlier, where you don't really understand what the system does, but you're trying to work out what you need in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
That's the other thing
with 9, 12, 18-month projects, isn't it? Your
Things
requirements
change,
evolve along that time, so that
Yeah.
when you mentioned about keeping documentation up to date, documentation that was written 18 months ago, businesses change that fast. It's
I'm laughing because it's the analogy of like when I was 14 years old and my mum took me to get the trousers that she'd had made for me, and by the time I got there I'd grown another 3 centimetres and they were too short
you've had
to let them down before I got there. And that's the analogy.
You've overindulged at Christmas and no longer can't do them up anymore, whatever it might be.
But I think Matt's point about the fact that, if you can get the template in and use it for 3 months and live with it, and there will be compromises, there will be bits that you maybe have to do on Excel, horror of horrors, or around the edge of the system. By the time you come to specify what you need for that particular area of the business, you're going to do it from a much more informed position.
You're educated,
than you
you understand
before.
the software, you understand the implications, you understand
terminology.
You understand what tasks are taking longer than they should. And what tasks actually, there isn't. You could end up potentially doing the traditional way, doing a complex piece of development for something that's taking somebody half an hour.
Well, it's the lean principle, isn't it? If you do it twice a month,
exactly.
It might be complex, but you're not doing it often. Whereas if you're doing something relatively simple and you're having to go off system 60 times a day, then that's not going to work, is it? Or that's a compromise. But you are better throwing labour and people at it in the short term until you qualify exactly what you need, because then you're only investing in the customizations or the ISV solutions or whatever that you are going to get payback on, rather than predicting what you're going to get payback on.
Exactly.
So I think, this doesn't. Do I think the traditional way of doing projects is dead? Absolutely not. I think there's a lot of companies that are coming from a bespoke system, and therefore, you typically when you're implementing Dynamics, you're looking to get back. We have this term called minimum viable solution, and the minimum viable solution, the minimum you can do on phase 1, which I think is where you should get to, so that you do the learning process. That is typically what your current system is capable of doing. And so there are companies out there who are migrating off. The typical one we see is AS400 bespoke RPG based systems or whatever.
Which is
20 years worth of bespoke on the top of it.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds of consult over years.
Suddenly they want to replace. So that, they will, I think, go the typical production route. But I think, and I also know our industry's got there's one or two companies who've gone very hard on the templated route, and that's almost exclusively what they do. And there's one or two companies, or quite a number of companies out there who are hostile to it, because they've got people who say, that's never going to work. And we could all quote instances where, of clients where, yes, the templated solution was never going to work. You got odd companies, just like you got odd shaped people like me, and so that they have got a point, but the point is that's not. Not everybody in the population is odd, and not every company is odd.
So what kind of organisation then? And how do we, when we engage with somebody, how do we work out whether they should go the bespoke route or whether they should go down a fixed implementation route?
Well, I think we're slightly different as a partner, that we've chosen one particular industry that we really specialise in. And I think the other thing I was going to say was that the app world has changed this a bit, that we've got much more productization of certain functionality. You can actually take off the shelf and plug them in. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Rather than everything having to be written bespoke. So we target companies within a specific sector, distribution predominantly, and so we have a questionnaire, and I think a lot of the other people have a templated that will ask you, 10 questions, very high level, and it'll tell you a yes or no. Is this really going to work for you, or actually,
do you need another conversation?
Yeah.
So that's how it kind of works.
That's how it kind of works, and that's all. You can do that online and then work out. Is this a good fit? And you might want then a phone call to clarify a few bits and pieces. But that's the way we're going. I think you've got, as we said, you've got the basic out the box finance systems that quite a lot of people are doing, and then we're starting, I think, to see people like ourselves then take that to the next level. So this isn't in within 2 weeks. Our solution will be designed, or has been designed, purely for distribution organisations, stuff with long shelves, stuff that you need to move around the warehouse and then get out and get in. But again, it's not an answer to absolutely everybody's solution. So you go
I think
through the
it's
questionnaire.
probably important to say as well is that from a customer's point of view, they still need to invest quite a lot of time into this solution.
Yeah.
So we still need the cleansed data.
Yeah.
The
it's
customers,
critical.
the vendors,
Why
the
won't that?
items,
Yeah.
the balances. We still need them to invest the time in acceptance testing and learning and training.
Yep.
All of those things actually we'll still need the customer to invest that amount of time in and to make sure that they're resourced properly to do that. It's not a it's not a magic wand.
No.
It still takes work to
But
get it in.
it is quicker, Liz.
It is
to
quicker. 100% it's quicker, but it still needs.
It doesn't remove the hard work and the commitment from the end user. I'd say there's actually more in this because we do expect the customers to do a lot of this themselves. We're going to help them, guide them, hold their hands, but there are tasks that everyone has to do, but they have to do it. You are right, we shortcut and we remove that design section from the
period
project.
of time it takes is shorter
and a lot cheaper.
It should be less painful, less stressful, but it still needs any new system.
The other plus that we haven't talked about for the organisation choosing a templated solution is that actually they get it live quicker.
Yeah.
So 3-4 months you're live, and so then and let's face it, when you do a 9-month, 12-month traditional project, which is not unusual to see, there's an awful lot of cost that comes through in that 9-12 months that actually they have to get live
also
before they get any form of payback.
It's so easy to lose focus as well, isn't it, in the longer projects? If you're doing it in a condensed 3 to 4 month period, you keep that kind of momentum going and you're seeing results every week, you're seeing progress every week, which is much easier to keep motivated to do it than it is if it's running for 18 months.
If you're getting that payback back after that shorter period of time, yes, the system might not be 100% precise fit, but if what it does do is making you more efficient, then that efficiency pays for the bits of the system that you've got to cope with off system because it's not 100% fit. So I think I could argue that from a financial payback perspective, actually doing the templated solution first and then building on top of that will probably give most organisations a better return on investment than doing the traditional try and make it all work, have a big project, lots of risk, lots of delays that can quite easily come in there to get it right, and then go live with a big bang and try and do everything at once.
I mean, there's still a lot of functionality we've added into this, so it's not a case of it's purely out of the box. We have Matt's team have a spreadsheet where they go through all the different types of functionality to give an estimate of what we think it's going to cost. To deliver what's in our templated solution, if we run all that functionality through the spreadsheet and said we're going to design it for the customer, it nearly doubled in price compared to what it cost to go on the template, because we're just removing that workshop process. So there's a hell of a lot in there.
Oh yeah, but you still get access to huge amounts of functionality.
Where the customer manages to remove all the workshop phase, they still have to spend a lot of time, I would say, before they even commit to this to understand what is and isn't, which is just important, included in the template.
But I think, we're very transparent about
absolutely.
what
we list exactly what is and isn't.
And don't make it's Microsoft, therefore I assume it must.
Yeah.
You hear that often. It's like, don't assume it does that. Go
Do
and
you
check
think
first.
this is a good option for those customers that are on older nav versions and allow themselves to get a little bit behind the curve?
Depends where they are. Again, still this. I think it is good, but if they've had 300 days worth of customization, it might be a bit difficult to go back to.
But if you've got a relatively straightforward implementation, or you've got bespoke in there that is now covered by either standard or some of the add-ons that we've got as part of the solution, it might be a good way because you already understand the processes, and actually whatever version you're on of nav, the actual process of taking an order through to invoice, they're not actually that dissimilar. The interface might look very different.
I mean, I was visiting a prospect on Tuesday, and they're a group organisation, and they've got, I think, 7 companies on NAV 2017, and they're looking at how they go. And actually, there was 2 of them which were highly bespoke, highly complex because they got very specific needs, and the other 5 were much more straightforward. And so actually doing the template solution for one of those to re-implement, and then building on top of that once they've done those, for the two that are more complex, for me is the right solution. So I think as in everything in our world, there's very few things where you can say that's right for everybody, which hey, that's good from our perspective, because they're going to need partners to advise. If the same thing was right for everybody, it would be global, off the shelf, bang, just do it from YouTube or whatever, I guess. But I still think that's there. I think, templated solutions, I think the vertical route is to go. I struggle to see how you do a template that covers everything from professional services to retail to every type of business that's out there.
Industry specific or kind of,
I mean, just as an example, I know you've been involved in the design of this map. What are the compromises that are built into ours, which is, it's called Delivered, it's for the distribution company. What are some of the compromises we've made, like a single company?
Yeah. I mean, we've limited certain areas. Yeah, things like company. I think the number of companies, trading companies. I think we just said one trading company. If you've got a top co and things like that, that's fine. That doesn't really.
But not within the template. Get the trading company running, and then once the program is finished, then you go and do.
Well, I think potentially, but you probably have the skills to do it yourself by then, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
a lot more of it.
We've covered. If you've got one or two of the financial companies, and all you do is you take the template kind of set up, just copy that a couple of times, and you've got it. So we cover that within the template. One managed warehouse. So if you've got 5 distribution centres, that then gets more complex.
Third-party logistics and that kind of integration and things.
No integration. There's no development whatsoever. Not even one field. Because as soon as you go off piste from the plan, then we have to then go and change the plan, and everything then changes. So we've been quite firm on that, really. We've got some add-ons, but limited at the moment. But that will increase over time. And I think from the distribution perspective, we'll probably add in more kind of off-the-shelf bits of functionality as time progresses.
And you can still, like you said, once you've got to that level, you can still go and use other ISV
It's a
solutions.
starting point.
I mean, you call it like a base camp, which I thought was always a good analogy. You've got to a point where you're starting, your journey's not complete though, and businesses continue to change and evolve all the time.
And actually, it's easier, for the consultant who's coming in for the difficult climb above the base camp. It's easier because they don't have to spend
they haven't got to worry about
learning what the base camp is this time.
It's
pretty standard, so you can make a lot more assumptions, I think. Once
no nasty surprises.
No nasty surprises of the last person left, and I think that's another plus of this, is it removes some of the dependency on individuals. Even when you've got a large partner like ourselves who's got a big team, passing it from one lead consultant to another is a substantial amount of time.
But also
you have to go and look at so much. I go into a prospective client when I'm asked to advise, and it's like, or an actual client, and it's like the number of questions I've got, you can spend a good few hours going through checking what the hell they've got.
When you've got a bespoke solution, a lot of the time that's the true on the customer side as well. They have one person that has driven that agenda and has driven that the way that solution works. So at least with this, you are sticking to a very standard path.
And I think and with something like Dynamics, there's a lot of options and there's a lot of opinion out there. Within our organisation, you go and ask 3 people what the solution, and they'll come up with, I prefer doing it this way, or I prefer that's the solution to that. And so they'll naturally sell that, explain that in a way that the client probably picks the one that they're recommending.
I also like the fact that on the template solutions, you can have a bunch of training that we do all the videos, everything like that. So it's not like you have to have something custom made for you, which is never going to happen.
Which means you can reuse as well when you've got somebody new.
Yeah.
It's very easy to train them because you haven't got to have a whole host of custom training.
And training is the thing that always gets slimmed down, because in effect, by the time you've constructed this ultimate solution that you want to build, there isn't, you're desperate to get it live to get payback on all the time and effort you've spent, so the training gets things.
But I think that's where I said that this is where the customer has to be prepared to commit that time, because I think it's really important with this that the training is.
Yeah, I mean, the training isn't, to be clear, isn't videos. That's not how we deliver it. That's how we support it. So we provide training, teams kind of going
One-to-one.
through one-to-one kind of training with a trainer, and then there's access to videos,
Supporting
documentation.
Yes, after
Yeah,
video
because
starts,
no
yeah.
one can remember it all, can they, necessarily?
And after, what we also do is after each course, we also then have a follow-up call with the consultant that's helping managing the project for you, to say, okay, what did you learn? Anything you need clarification on? Do you understand now how we're going to configure it for you?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get that done.
Yeah.
Move on to the next area. So it is interactive. It's not just say go and learn it.
Yeah.
We are there to help and advise still. Even though it's templated, there's still flexibility within
Well,
that.
it's got to be successful, hasn't it? I mean, whichever way you implement has got to come up with a result that's a quality result, and that.
Yeah.
So we need to do what that takes, but I think it's a very different commercial argument. The whole kind of yes, we know what we're doing. It does take out of should we spend the budget on this or this. None of those discussions happen because you're buying a car it's like going into a dealership and buying a car that's already built. You're not going through the configurator here. The manufacturer has decided this is the most common model, this is the colour that's the most popular, this is
But
the
it still
whatever,
gets you from
and
A to B.
you're driving away in it.
Yeah, but it still gets you from A to B. It still does the job. It might not have the heated steering wheel, but it works.
Heated steering wheel.
I'm such a princess, I'm sorry.
It's like, but yeah,
It
exactly.
just removes the conversation that Liz was having about the day rates and how do I know you're doing a full day. You are guaranteed to end up with this outcome. If you do what you're meant to be doing at the end of the 4 months, you'll get this for a fixed price, and so it doesn't matter how many days. That's our problem to get it
Absolutely.
in and up and running. Yeah.
So doesn't suit everybody, not for everybody, but certainly
It's an
a
option
really
to be
good
looked at.
option
Yeah.
for a lot of customers that are prepared to
I mean, I'll sit here and perhaps be slightly controversial. I think that in 5 years' time, probably the majority of implementations will start with a templated solution and then build on the top of that. I think it's a trend. I think also part of the thing that's progressing that trend is Microsoft is putting a lot of time and effort into Microsoft's motivation is they want more people on Business Central, CRM, whatever. So ease of adoption, that they resent the fact that partners have to take 12 months and huge cost of resources to get them the subscriptions that they really want to see. So they're putting a lot of effort into like, how do we make this faster, easier? How do we cut time and effort out of it? And those innovations aren't necessarily easy to put into a traditional project, whereas they're much easier to build into the template. And the other analogy that comes to mind is, in the construction sector, you traditionally had where you turn up at the building site with a bunch of materials and you start building. You've seen a lot more trend where they're building it in a factory as a kit, it's getting delivered to site on a lorry, and then 3 days and they put it together and it's up and it's watertight. And so I think there is this kind of mass production of at a higher quality, at a lower price necessarily, or maybe equivalent price, but you get the result quicker or whatever. Yep. There's lots of pros and cons with this. This is a trend in all sectors, I'd probably argue. And this is how it's hitting us. And, we don't want to be dinosaurs and just ignore that trend. But as usual with TechMan, we're trying to put our spin on it.
I think we're trying to do what's right for the customer. There are some customers that this will fit.
Best possible solution you can get for this cost and this time frame.
Absolutely.
Well, it comes back to the core philosophy we've always had: is spend the client's money like it's your own.
Yeah.
And if you do that, our numbers look after themselves, and we have a long-term relationship with the customer. So if you can sit there and say, well, if I was you, this is a way I would get off this absolutely awful mess that I've got and onto something that can get this in 3 months.
And of course, it's in our interest
as opposed
to keep these
to 9.
4 months.
it's in our interest to keep these customers for the long term as well.
Absolutely.
So we only want to recommend this as an option if
it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that a lot of companies coming off maybe or growing very quickly, coming off a smaller, more limited package that they're running their business on, hitting some of those boundaries. Business Central will continue to grow with you. As you said many times,
People
it's
coming
very,
on
very
Zero,
scalable.
Sage,
Yeah, very
Pegasus,
scalable.
Zero,
all of those, they're templated, they're restricted in what they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
So coming off those types of solutions is, for me,
you won't
is
have the
perfect
functionality
fit.
that we're putting in the template in some of those solutions.
Oh,
will you?
absolutely not.
You're
Nowhere near.
going to get
Nowhere
extra
near.
on top of what you've
But
had previously.
you've got the foundation to
And then go again.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as always, thanks Liz, James, Matt for joining us. Nice discussion for the first couple of weeks of the new year. So we'll meet again, no doubt, in the next month. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Techman Talks Dynamics.